representing the country in a prestigious international art event such as the Gwangju Biennale definitely has its highs and lows. The chance to grab the opportunity and make a commitment to the organizing committee provided the necessary adrenaline rush for the curator and the selected artists to bring out the best in us in terms of creative capacities.
The group of artists that will be participating from the Philippines is, I'm very confident, somehow carries the spirit of our country. It is always a humbling experience to be among fellow artists and somehow find commonalities within our own individual expressions to come up with a coherent and at the same time holistic approach in presenting our country to an international arena.
When I said yes to the project, I knew that I was responding to many different levels of connections. Connections with the artists I work with here, the artists who are exhibiting also in other pavilions, our Korean colleagues, and the space, the global space. I was contemplating on curation as a process, not exactly entirely output-driven. The artworks I'll be placing are arranged as archipelagos to probably be a metaphor for the archipelago of selves, which is also an archipelago of a nation, not only geographically, but in terms of experiences, visions, and realities. We are archipelagic in nature. The biggest challenge also is funding. I knew that from the beginning, but I saw it as an opportunity to really contemplate and research about the modes of finding resources, to see funding as a modality, I guess.
Ginawa ko kasi siyang triptych. 3 part siya. So, dahil maganda rin yung triptych, dahil para siyang may narrative. Narrative niya is parang storya, may beginning, may middle, may end. Kumbaga, para din siyang sine na nakikita mo lang sa isang tingin. Kumbaga, para siyang frozen na in time na ito yung slice nung nangyayari sa ating bansa.
I was trained as a news photographer. So I started covering national news for a news magazine. Later on, I focused on several topics in Philippine society and pursued a sort of specialized path on documentary photography. The installation that I'm planning to do is it's like a scroll, probably printed on a cloth material, and then hanging from, I think, 30 or 40 feet all the way down to the floor. And this will include the images that I will be selecting for the series. Documentary photography essentially is a part of photojournalism, only that it entails more, I would say, dedication and time for observation, and at the same time, in documentary photography, I would say there is more emphasis on systemic change. You would want to see an issue or story roll over, capture it, and hopefully see the change that comes right after.
Marawi did not take place. It's composed of 4 videos. So those videos were all phone interviews. What you see on the screen is a kaleidoscopic rendition of the Marawi map, wherein we see more of patterns instead of the map itself. And then we see a scrolling text translation subtitle of the story that they're telling you. These videos are actually screensavers. They look like screensavers. They were meant to act as screensavers. And so the installation was through a screensaver app, which I installed in all of the computers in a computer room. I put in each of the computer the screensaver, so 4. And so the story will only be heard if you've left the computer long enough for the screensavers to pop out. In my recording of my installation, one by one, the screens went blank, and then one by one, the voices came out, filled the room with all of the stories of how they were able to escape Marawi.
My piece for this exhibition is entitled Confronting Demarcations. It is a composition patterned after the literal body of water that surrounds the Philippines, China, Vietnam, and Cambodia. It is a statement piece with dimensions of 8 feet in height and 20 feet in length. And this expresses personal sentiments on the current tensions with regards the contested areas and also my interpretation to locations of freedom. The opportunity to present my art in the world stage has prompted me to reflect on the growing tensions between the Philippines and China, on the territorial and maritime jurisdiction disputes in the West Philippine Sea. As an artist living in an archipelago, the idea of the conflict escalating to a worst case scenario is very disturbing to me. Thus, the artwork tries to capture the sentiments of everyone who value peace and freedom as a collective concern that the ongoing dispute might break out into armed conflict because any instability in the region can upset regular economic activities and derail development. So, for a painter like myself, it posits the question, can dash lines actually be drawn in water? As in art, it seems silly enough. But then again, greed and power can make anyone delusional.
Guerrera is the working title of a single-channel video installation which combines parcels and excerpts. So it's going to be like a historical assemblage of women, revolutionary women in various historical periods in history. To quote the revolutionary Lorena Barrio, she said, "The Filipino women's place is in the struggle." So chronicling the story of women during these times of crisis is in itself an act of resistance. This is something that is not just, determined or confined to our country, but this is happening all over the world. And I hope that my piece will resonate to them. What also makes it distinguished is it's framed from the women's perspective. So it's going to be lensed from their story and from their emotions, which will be different from the way they were portrayed.
First, I looked at the works of the exhibiting artists to see how they struggled with the concept of locating freedom, and then correlated it with my own understanding of the country's struggle with freedom also. So I thought of the main image being this. They're irregular shapes and different colors, more or less in a continuum. There's been a long struggle for freedom in the Philippines. Our country officially was declared independent not very long ago, more than just around 100 years or more. But even before that, there's been a long struggle for it. So I was thinking that there's this constant push to find a certain kind of freedom in the Philippines. And that's what I tried to represent in the image, the idea of a continuous, sometimes interrupted, but it's colorful because it comes from different kinds of people, different areas. But overall, it's an unbroken push.
I'm working on two large-scale art installations. One is entitled Desaparecidos, which deals with a representation of those who were left behind by kins, family members, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a friend, a colleague, or a total stranger that we respect now has disappeared within the periods of martial law in the Philippines. For me, it is a very timely reminder that these abductions still exist, not only in the country but in other parts of the world, and that we need to be reminded that this particular painful history from our past has happened, and we continue to seek justice for these people. Thus, I created this particular installation to somehow serve as a memory marker. Then there's debugging. It's a more light, whimsical take on the idea of how generations would somehow pick lies, as expressed by a spiral staircase that has several individuals who are in the act of picking lice, L-I-C-E, on the heads of the younger generation. So it's from a young kid all the way to a grandmother. For me, they have an open cranium, not similar to biological anatomy models, in which they are debugging the brain, so to speak. So I wanted to focus on the idea, especially within the Asian country, of extended families being their support mechanisms in order for us to survive through whatever your country is going through, and that it is the responsibility of each generation within the family members to somehow debug no, these lies that are perpetuated by different societies within their particular localities.
The notion of freedom immediately became very clear when it's connected with the location of the exhibition, Gwangju, where there was a Gwangju uprising. And so if one really thinks about how all these ideas connect together, it's a resistance, right?
The locations of freedom is universal in many ways, however specific it is to our stories. Artists from other countries outside of Asia will easily understand freedom because it's something universal. But more importantly, it also honors the space.
Locations of freedom also represents the continuous struggle of different communities and of course the Filipino in our continuous search for national identity and basically freedom from oppression. I think freedom is the continuous pursuit of freedom. So the stories that happens at present or that has happened in the past and it continues to happen, no? This is where me as a documentary photographer focus on the continuous action of trying to survive the vicious cycle of poverty, the continuous pushback against the aggression, for example, by state forces. In image making, locations of freedom, I think, at least for me, no, it's the intersection of the physical space. Learning the history of Gwangju as a site of resistance also made me realize that it is quite important to at least match the importance of this space and the history of this space and the people. Looking through my archive again, I was trying to find specific moments in the last maybe 10 or at least 20 years of since I started doing photojournalism and documentary photography, representing those small or even historic moments in Philippine society to show it to the public in Gwangju and whoever will be visiting the pavilion.
I found it as an opportunity for me to share the Filipino narrative in terms of what we experience as a people, find commonalities within our Asian neighbors in terms of these painful histories that we needed to share, and popular struggles that have culminated into successful people power movements.
This will create hopefully a dialogue with the historical impact and relevance of the region of Gwangju, which I learned is also a very important site for resistance and protest that were staged against the dictatorship in the 1880s.
I wanted to create a feeling of solidarity that the Philippines and its artists understands the struggle for democracy that Gwangju and Gwangju Biennale represent. And I also want to show that there's a very vibrant, there's a very interesting and progressive art community in the Philippines.
The impetus to resist comes from a deep notion of belonging. So belonging to a place, belonging to a space, to a people. To see locations of freedom or resistance as wars this way is to understand that these things might never end. The conflicts, they might never end because the people will always fight for what they love, for the spaces that hold who they are.
Actually, it was introspective in my experiences on what is happening with the country. Gusto kong makita nila yung experience na naranasan natin sa country ng Philippines. Malaman nila yung mga paghihirap na dinadanas ng mga ordinaryong Filipino. Naranasan ko rin yung takot sa panahon. Dahil kumbaga nga, isa lang yung channel na papanoodin mo, parang magtataka ka, pagbata ka, ano ba yung nangyayari? Medyo personal yung, kumbaga, yung atake ko dun sa ng locations of freedom. Kasi yung personal yung dating niya sa akin.
I want the locations of freedom to be a beginning for many artists to be able to engage in the global sphere and also to be conscious about unhinging from many pressures outside, no matter how hard that would be.
This Philippine theme for the Gwangju Biennale still has a lot of optimism and resilience that we are known for as Filipinos, as we currently try to find ways to get there, and if not, do it by ourselves.
I hope that altogether we will be able to send a strong and unique, immersive message as a group of artists who are striving to revisit and to reclaim locations of freedom, not just in our country, but all over the world.
I wanted, together with my fellow artists who will be participating in the Biennale, to somehow give our international audience an idea on the degree of storytelling, no? The different expressions that we do as creatives with regards to imaging the times or somehow embodying the zeitgeist, no, of our particular era. For me, these are opportunities for discourse, no, for conversations.
How do we really become free?
When the truth is under siege, no, and the press is pinned down by the state, the arts become our second line of defense. No? How powerful this medium is for social change. No?